The mountains of eastern Afghanistan were still that morning, blanketed in a thin mist that carried the metallic scent of dust and war. It was the kind of silence that could make even seasoned soldiers uneasy, the kind that came right before chaos. Sergeant David Lewis stood on a jagged ridge, his boots grinding gravel, as he scanned the narrow valley below through binoculars. The terrain was deceptive, quiet, empty, and dead-looking. But Lewis knew better. They all did. He turned to his squad, 8 men from the 3rd Ranger Battalion, tired but sharp after a week-long reconnaissance mission deep in insurgent territory. "All right, keep eyes open and comms clear," he said, his voice low but firm. "Intel says the village is cold, but I don't trust it." Corporal Diaz, the youngest in the group, adjusted his helmet nervously. "Sir, what are we even looking for out here? This whole area feels wrong." Lewis glanced at him. "You feel it because it is wrong. We've been too quiet for too long." And then it happened. The first explosion hit with the force of a thunderclap, an RPG slamming into the dirt just 20 feet from their Humvee. The shockwave threw men to the ground as dust and rock burst into the air. Before anyone could react, automatic gunfire erupted from both ridgelines, the sharp tat-tat-tat echoing through the valley. "Contact! Contact! 2 sides!" Lewis bellowed, diving behind the armored vehicle. Bullets sparked off the metal frame as the Rangers scrambled for cover. "Return fire! Find those shooters!" Private Mills fired bursts from his M4 toward the ridge. "I can't see them. They're dug in. Smoke grenades." "Now!" Lewis shouted. Purple smoke hissed across the rocks, forming thin cover, but the enemy had elevation and numbers. Every time a Ranger peeked out, rounds snapped inches from their heads. The radio crackled to life, static cutting through the chaos. "Base, this is Ranger Team Bravo. We're taking heavy fire ambushed from 2 directions. Repeat, enemies all around." The reply came faint and broken. "Bravo Team, say again." "You're breaking up. What's your location?" Lewis pressed his radio harder to his ear. "We're pinned, can't move. Request immediate air or ground support." No answer. The enemy fire intensified. From behind the boulders and ridges, muzzle flashes winked like cruel stars. The valley that had seemed so still was now alive with death. One Ranger took a bullet to the leg, collapsing with a scream. Another tried to drag him to cover, only to be pinned by another burst. "Where the hell's that support?" Lewis muttered under his breath. He glanced around. His men were low on ammo, their Humvee disabled, comms cutting in and out. They were stranded. Then, for a brief second, the gunfire paused. Just long enough for Lewis to hear the wind move through the rocks again. It was strange, almost peaceful, before the storm returned twice as loud. He tried the radio once more, shouting into it this time. "Base, this is Sergeant Lewis. We're surrounded. Enemies closing in from north and west. We won't hold much longer." Miles away at Camp Ward, the operations tent was filled with the usual low hum of chatter, until Lewis's transmission burst through. Technicians froze, exchanging looks. The signal was faint, broken, but unmistakable. "Enemies all around?" Inside the tactical room, Staff Sergeant Maya Hall stood by the map table, arms crossed, scanning the operations feed. She had just returned from a 36-hour Overwatch assignment, her face still streaked with dust. The words Ranger Team Bravo snapped her attention instantly. She leaned closer to the comms officer. "Repeat that feed. What's happening out there?" "Ambush, ma'am." "They're cut off. We're losing signal." Maya's eyes darted to the coordinates on the screen, a remote valley about 30 clicks from base. She knew that terrain. She'd been there once, a year ago, watching over a different unit from a rocky overlook. It was a death trap. She turned to her commanding officer, Captain Rhodes, who was already studying the map. "Sir, if they're pinned in that valley, they won't last 10 minutes without overwatch," she said sharply. Rhodes sighed. "We don't have anyone in position. Air support's grounded until the dust clears. The QRF's 20 minutes out." 20 minutes? Maya repeated, disbelief cutting through her voice. "They won't have 5. Rhodes met her gaze. He knew her reputation. Cool under fire, unmatched behind a scope, stubborn as hell. She'd volunteered for missions no one else would touch. But this wasn't her operation. "Hall," he said, voice low, "you're not on this mission roster." She didn't flinch. "Doesn't matter. Those are our Rangers out there." He hesitated, watching her shoulders tighten, her gloved hands already moving toward her rifle case. There was no stopping her once she'd decided. Finally, he exhaled, resigned. "You've got guts, Sergeant." Maya's tone was calm, but her eyes burned with resolve. "Guts don't win fights, sir. Precision does." Within minutes, she was fully geared, helmet strapped, rifle slung, ammo tight on her vest. The other quick response soldiers were prepping the helicopter, their faces tense. Most had heard of her, the woman sniper who never missed. As the rotors began to spin, Maya climbed aboard and grabbed the headset. "This is Staff Sergeant Hall. We move now." The pilot glanced back. "Dust's thick. We'll be flying blind for most of the route." Maya checked her rifle one last time, locking the bolt with a firm click. "Then fly low and trust your gut. Those men out there are running out of time." The helicopter lifted into the orange haze, blades chopping through smoke and wind. Beneath them, the jagged terrain stretched like a scar across the earth. Back in the valley, the Rangers were barely holding the line. The smoke grenades had faded, and visibility was near zero. Lewis was bleeding from a shrapnel wound, trying to keep morale alive. "Stay low. Keep the line tight," he yelled. Diaz crawled to him, face pale. "We're almost dry, Sarge. Only a few mags left." Lewis looked up toward the ridge, jaw clenched. "Then we make every shot count." For the next 10 minutes, time blurred, bursts of gunfire, shouted commands, and the constant whistle of bullets tearing the air. The smell of burnt powder mixed with dust and blood. Then, faintly, over the roar of gunfire, they heard it, the distant hum of helicopter blades. "Air support?" Mills shouted. Lewis squinted toward the sky. "No, too small. That's a QRF bird." The sound grew louder, a rhythmic thrum cutting through the chaos. Then, through the dust clouds, a dark shape appeared, slicing low over the ridge. The Rangers cheered weakly. The pilot's voice came over comms. "We've got eyes on your position. Hold tight." Inside the chopper, Maya Hall adjusted her scope, scanning the ground below. From her vantage point, she could see the muzzle flashes glinting on both ridges. Her jaw tightened. "Pilot, set me down on that ridge, northwest side," she ordered. "Can't do that, ma'am. It's too hot." "Then hover." "I'll drop." Before the pilot could argue, Maya clipped her harness to the line, swung open the side door, and leapt into the storm. She disappeared into the smoke, a lone shadow descending toward chaos. The Rangers below didn't know it yet, but their lifeline had just arrived. One woman, one rifle, and a promise she intended to keep. And as her boots hit the rocky earth, she whispered the same words she'd said before every mission. "Not on my watch." The helicopter blades thundered overhead, slicing through the dense Afghan air. Inside, Staff Sergeant Maya Hall sat in silence, her gloved hands resting on her rifle, the M2010 ESR, her most trusted companion. Dust danced in the vibrating light that filtered through the open door. She stared out at the distant horizon, where smoke curled upward like dark fingers clawing at the sky. As the bird rattled through turbulence, her mind drifted, not out of fear, but out of habit. Every mission carried echoes of the past. Every sound, every vibration, had a memory tied to it. Years ago, before the uniform, before the rifle, she'd been just another small-town girl from Kansas. A quiet kid who loved the wide-open fields more than people. Her father, Daniel Hall, had been a Marine, stoic, disciplined, the kind of man who didn't talk much but said everything through action. Maya remembered those long summer evenings, when the sun dipped below the wheat fields and her father would set up tin cans on fence posts. "You want to learn to shoot?" he'd asked one day, handing her a battered old .22. She'd nodded eagerly, too young to understand what shooting truly meant. "Then start by learning to breathe," he'd said. "The gun doesn't kill. The person who panics does." That was her first lesson, and one she never forgot. By age 12, she could outshoot her cousins. By 15, she could hit moving targets. And by 18, she knew she wasn't meant for a quiet life. While other girls dreamed of college or travel, Maya dreamed of service, of doing something that mattered. When she told her father she wanted to enlist, he didn't smile or protest. He just looked at her long and hard, then nodded once. "You'll see things you'll never forget," he said quietly. "But if you go, don't half-ass it. Be the best." She took that to heart. When Maya joined the Army, she was placed in a regular infantry unit at first. It didn't take long for people to notice her precision. During a range test, she scored near-perfect accuracy at 800 meters, something even seasoned marksmen struggled to do. The instructors were impressed. Her peers? Not so much. "Guess the girl can shoot," one soldier muttered. "Let's see how she handles a real fight." She ignored them. The Army wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving herself right. The opportunity came a year later when she applied for advanced sniper training. Few women had ever even attempted it. The instructors warned her it would be brutal. Weeks of cold, hunger, and exhaustion. Crawling for miles undetected. Sleeping in the dirt. Zero margin for error. She simply said, "When do we start?" The training was worse than anything she'd imagined. The days blurred into a haze of mud and pain. She learned to move like a shadow, to shoot in wind and rain, to wait for hours without blinking. One test required her to crawl a kilometer toward a target without being spotted by observers scanning through scopes. By the 900-meter mark, her arms were trembling, her body shaking from exhaustion. The sun scorched her back, sweat stinging her eyes. She could see the final marker, just a few yards ahead, but her leg cramped violently. For a moment, she wanted to quit. Then she heard her father's voice echoing in her head. "The gun doesn't kill. The person who panics does." So she didn't panic. She pushed through the pain, dragging herself inch by inch until she reached the final position. When she pulled the trigger and hit the target dead center, even the instructors couldn't hide their surprise. "Hall," one said, lowering his binoculars, "you're a damn ghost." She graduated top of her class. Her first deployment changed everything. War wasn't like training. It wasn't about numbers or precision or medals. It was about staying alive and keeping others alive too. In her first real engagement, her unit was ambushed outside Kandahar. The team leader went down early, and chaos erupted. Maya climbed a water tower under fire, set her scope, and began eliminating targets one by one. She saved 5 men that day, including one who would later nickname her Deadeye Hall. After that, no one questioned her place on the team. But Maya never celebrated kills. She didn't see them as victories. Every life taken was a life that once laughed, once breathed. She carried each one in silence, her emotions tucked behind the cold steel of her rifle. At night, when others joked or smoked to unwind, she'd sit alone, cleaning her weapon piece by piece. It wasn't ritual. It was reflection. That silence became her armor. Now, years later, as the helicopter roared toward the mountains, that same stillness filled her. The pilot's voice crackled in her headset. ETA 5 minutes. Landing zone's hot. Copy, Maya replied, checking her weapon. The soldier beside her glanced over. Ma'am, you really think those Rangers are still alive down there? She looked out the open door. The mountains stretched endlessly below, cruel, unforgiving, and indifferent. They're Rangers, she said quietly. If they're breathing, they're fighting. The soldier nodded, though his expression betrayed doubt. Maya leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment. She thought of the faces of the men she'd saved, and the ones she hadn't. The battlefield didn't care about gender or rank. It only cared about decisions, the ones you made fast enough to live with. And right now, she had one to make: how to reach them. Her radio crackled again. All teams, this is command. Bravo team still under heavy fire. Repeat, heavy contact. Air support delayed. Ground QRF en route. Maya looked toward the front. How delayed? 10 minutes, the pilot answered grimly. Maybe more. Winds shifting. She exhaled through her nose. 10 minutes could mean death for an entire squad. Without another word, she reached for her gear, tightening straps, securing her rifle. The pilot glanced back at her. You planning to drop in before we land? Something like that. He shook his head. You're crazy. She half smiled. That's what they said before training. The laughter from the crew was short and nervous. Outside, the mountains loomed closer, jagged peaks cutting through the clouds. The smell of gunpowder already lingered in the wind. Through the haze, flashes of light flickered across a distant ridge. Maya recognized the pattern instantly. Muzzle fire. Her heart rate didn't rise. Her breathing didn't change. She simply pulled her scope closer, peering through the glass. Through the magnification, she could see the Ranger's position, pinned behind a Humvee, surrounded by smoke and chaos. The scene below was all too familiar. And yet, something about it felt personal. Maybe because she knew exactly what that helplessness felt like, waiting for help that might not come. She clicked the radio. Command, this is Hall. I've got visual on Bravo team's position. I can make the ridge from here. Permission to engage from Overwatch? There was a pause on the line. Negative, Hall? You're not assigned to that unit. Wait for the QRF. She smirked slightly. Copy that. Then she turned off the radio. Rules were rules, but survival didn't wait for permission. As the helicopter began its descent, the world outside was chaos. Smoke, flashes, and rising dust. The wind whipped her hair beneath the helmet as she rose to her feet, gripping the side rail. One of the crew shouted, "What are you doing?" "Getting to work," she said simply, and stepped toward the open door. Below, the battlefield waited, a storm of bullets and courage. And as Maya Hall prepared to leap into it, she whispered her father's words once more. Breathe. Don't panic. Precision wins. The rope unfurled. The earth raced up to meet her, and the legend of the woman behind the rifle was about to begin. The rope hissed against the metal of the helicopter as Staff Sergeant Maya Hall descended into the storm. Wind ripped at her gear, the air thick with dust and smoke. From above, she looked like a shadow cutting through chaos, a single figure against the vast Afghan sky. Below her, the valley burned. Explosions bloomed like cruel flowers, and tracer rounds carved orange lines through the air. She could hear the distant cries of men over the roar of gunfire. The Rangers were still fighting, barely. Halfway down, the rope jerked violently. The pilot shouted something into her headset, but static drowned it out. Maya didn't look up. She knew what it meant. The enemy had spotted the bird. Bullets pinged off the helicopter's hull, and she could feel the vibration travel down the rope into her hands. Go! Go! The crew chief yelled. She didn't wait. She unclipped early, dropping the last 15 feet and hitting the rocky ground hard. Pain shot through her knees, but she rolled to absorb the impact and came up crouched, rifle in hand. The chopper banked hard and veered away, smoke trails chasing it as it disappeared behind a ridge. For a few seconds, the only sound was her breathing, controlled, measured, steady. Then chaos. Gunfire cracked from every direction. Dust exploded near her boots as rounds struck the ground. She sprinted for cover, sliding behind a jagged rock formation. The valley reeked of burning oil and metal. Smoke rolled across the terrain, turning daylight into a hazy twilight of fire and grit. Maya tapped her comms. "Bravo team, this is Hall. Do you copy?" Static. She switched frequencies. Sergeant Lewis responded. A broken voice came through, distant but alive. "Lewis here, pinned. Northwest ridge." Relief flashed across her face. "Hold position." "I'm coming to you," she said. She pulled her rifle close, scanning through the scope. Through the smoke, she spotted the faint glint of helmets, the Rangers, dug in behind a wrecked Humvee. A dozen meters uphill, enemy fighters moved between rocks, firing in bursts. They had the high ground, and the Rangers were boxed in below. "Classic kill box," she muttered under her breath. "Not today." She moved low, crawling between rocks, staying invisible. Each step was a calculation. Every inch forward, a risk. Bullets whipped overhead, throwing sparks off the stone. The ground trembled from another explosion nearby, showering her with dirt. Finally, she reached a narrow depression that overlooked the ambush zone. She positioned herself behind a slab of granite and unfolded the bipod of her rifle. The weapon rested like an extension of her body, cold and precise. Through her scope, she caught sight of the first insurgent, crouched behind a boulder, reloading. She exhaled slowly, aligning her crosshairs. One steady squeeze crack. The man dropped before he could raise his rifle. She shifted right. Another fighter sprinted toward the ridge, shouting orders. Crack. Gone. A third popped his head up to fire. Crack. Silence. In less than 10 seconds, 3 threats were gone. The Rangers below hadn't even seen where the shots came from, but they noticed the sudden quiet. Did someone just take them out? Diaz asked, peeking from behind the Humvee. Lewis frowned, scanning the ridges. I don't know. But whoever it is, keep their line clear. Maya continued picking targets, each shot deliberate and surgical. The rhythm of battle began to shift. The enemy's coordinated fire broke into confusion. They couldn't locate her. Her heartbeat stayed even. Her breathing steady. Her world had narrowed to the crosshairs. Then, over her scope, she saw a flash of movement, an RPG being shouldered near the far rocks. She adjusted, compensating for distance and wind. Before the insurgent could fire, her bullet caught him mid-motion. The rocket tumbled from his hands and detonated, scattering his comrades. The blast echoed through the valley. Down below, the Rangers felt it, and for the first time in hours, they saw hope. Whoever's up there, Lewis shouted, keep doing it. Maya smiled faintly. Copy that, she whispered, though they couldn't hear her. Minutes passed like hours. The enemy regrouped, firing toward her position. Rounds chewed into the rocks around her, sending shards into her arm. She didn't flinch. Crawling backward, she relocated, using smoke as cover. A sniper knew better than to stay in one place. When she reached a new perch, she spotted something that made her blood run cold. 3 insurgents flanking down toward the Rangers' position, using the smoke as cover of their own. "Not today," she muttered again. She shifted to a kneeling stance. It was a longer shot, moving targets through smoke at nearly 700 meters. But her finger didn't tremble. She led the first target slightly. Crack, down. The second stumbled, confused, crack, gone. The third froze, realizing too late, crack. Silence again. She exhaled, lowering her scope. "Clear," she said softly. When she finally crawled down toward the valley floor, the air was thick with dust. The Rangers spotted her through the haze, unsure if she was friend or foe. Diaz raised his weapon, squinting. "Hold fire." Lewis barked. "Let me see." Then the figure emerged through the smoke, helmet streaked with soot, rifle slung, her steps steady and deliberate. Lewis blinked. "That's Hall?" She reached their position, sliding behind the wrecked Humvee. "Nice of you to start the party without me," she said, voice calm despite the chaos. Lewis laughed in disbelief, shaking his head. "We radioed for support, not a damn miracle." "Miracle's busy," she said dryly, checking the wounded Ranger's leg. "How bad?" "Through and through." "He'll make it," Lewis replied. Maya nodded, then pointed toward the ridge. "We've got maybe a dozen left up there. They're regrouping for a push." "Ammo's low," Diaz said grimly. She handed him a spare mag from her belt. "Then make every bullet count." Her calmness under fire was contagious. Even the wounded straightened a little, feeding off her composure. She moved between them with quiet authority, checking angles, repositioning rifles, guiding fire sectors like she'd rehearsed it 1,000 times. Lewis watched her, amazed. "You just dropped in here alone?" "Couldn't let you boys have all the fun," she said, reloading smoothly. "Remind me never to play cards against you," he muttered. She smirked. "You wouldn't win." Then her radio crackled faintly again, the command channel coming back online. "Hall status?" She keyed the mic. "Linked with Bravo team. Situation stabilized, but we need extraction and medevac." "Copy that," came the reply. "QRF en route, ETA 5 minutes." Maya glanced toward the horizon. Smoke and dust still swirled, but the intensity of fire was fading. The enemy had realized they'd lost the element of surprise, and worse, they were now being hunted. 5 minutes, she said to Lewis. "Let's make them count." She moved back into position, taking overwatch as the Rangers reorganized. Her scope swept the ridges, eyes sharp as glass. Every movement, every flicker, she tracked with precision. When the counterattack came, it was brief. Desperate men charging downhill into disciplined fire. It was over in less than 2 minutes. The battlefield grew quiet again, broken only by the crackle of flames and the low hum of approaching rotors. As the extraction helicopters circled in, Maya stayed on overwatch, rifle steady until the last Ranger was loaded. Only then did she lower her weapon. Lewis approached, gripping her shoulder. "Didn't think anyone was coming," he said. She shrugged lightly. "I wasn't supposed to." He laughed, a weary, genuine sound. "Guess orders don't mean much to you, huh?" "Sometimes," she replied, looking toward the fading smoke. "You don't wait for permission to do what's right." The helicopter dust swirled around them as she climbed aboard with the team she'd just saved. The valley shrank beneath them, littered with the ghosts of war and the silence that followed. Diaz, sitting across from her, studied her for a long moment before speaking. "You came out of nowhere," he said. "Through the smoke. Like something out of a movie." Maya met his eyes, expression unreadable. "No," she said quietly. "Movies end happy. Then she looked back out the window, at the mountains that had tried to swallow them all, and whispered to herself, "We're not done yet." The rhythmic thump of the helicopter faded into the distance, leaving behind only silence and smoke. The valley had gone eerily still, as if holding its breath after the violence that had consumed it. The Rangers crouched among the rocks, weary eyes sweeping the ridges. They had survived for now. Maya Hall remained motionless at the edge of the group, scanning the horizon through her scope. The sun was dipping low, bleeding orange light across the shattered landscape. She could see shadows moving far away, enemy silhouettes, small but deliberate. The fight wasn't over. It was only catching its breath. She keyed her radio. "Command, this is Hall. Extraction incomplete. Still hostiles in range." A burst of static then. "Copy. Hall, QRF delayed by ground fire east of your position. ETA 10 minutes minimum." 10 minutes. In combat, 10 minutes could feel like a lifetime. Or an execution countdown. She turned to Lewis. "We're not out yet. They're regrouping on the ridge. About 2 dozen left, maybe more." Lewis exhaled, his jaw tightening. "Ammo's half gone. We can't outlast another wave." Maya crouched beside him, sketching a quick plan in the dirt with her knife. "We won't outlast them, we'll outsmart them." Split into 2 fire teams. Alpha holds the south approach. Bravo moves with me to the ridge. We flank them before they flank us. Diaz frowned. "We're moving uphill into them?" Her tone was calm but firm. "If we wait, we die here. If we move, we choose where to fight." That silenced any argument. Rangers respected confidence, and Maya's voice carried it like command steel. "Diaz," she continued, "lay smoke on the east side. Make them think we're retreating. When they shift fire, we hit from the west. Fast and quiet." Lewis nodded slowly, studying her. "You've done this before." "Enough times to know it works," she replied, locking eyes with him. "You trust me?" Lewis hesitated only a moment and gave a short nod. "Let's move." The Rangers fanned out, ghost-like among the rocks. Smoke grenades hissed and rolled downhill, curling up in dense white clouds. The enemy, seeing movement through the haze, began firing prematurely, their shots wild, chaotic. Under cover of the distraction, Maya led Bravo team up a narrow ravine that twisted toward the enemy's flank. Every step was silent, rehearsed, lethal. The further they climbed, the more the valley opened below them. A battlefield painted in smoke and firelight. Maya's boots crunched softly on the gravel. Her rifle stayed low but ready, her senses tuned to every sound, the flutter of wind, the click of a distant safety catch, the faint whisper of boots moving through sand. At the top of the ridge, she signaled for the Rangers to halt. The enemy was just beyond. She could hear their voices, rough and confident. They thought they had the advantage. Maya crawled forward until she could see them clearly. At least 20 men, setting up positions, weapons trained downhill toward where they believed the Rangers were still trapped. They never saw her. She adjusted her scope, breathed once, and fired. The first target went down silently. Before the second could react, she fired again. 2, then 3. Her shots cracked through the smoke like judgment itself. The Rangers moved in behind her, firing controlled bursts. Chaos erupted on the ridge. The insurgents turned in confusion, shouting, scattering for cover. But there was nowhere to hide. Maya's fire team advanced methodically, covering, shooting, moving, a perfect rhythm of precision and aggression. One of the enemy fighters tried to rush her position, shouting something in Pashto. She pivoted smoothly, shot him mid-stride, and kept moving without breaking her breathing pattern. Lewis's voice came over comms. "Alpha's clear. They're breaking formation. Push forward." Maya ordered. Don't let them regroup. They pressed higher, the ground littered with shell casings and dust. The air burned hot, filled with the acrid stench of gunpowder. An explosion tore through the rocks ahead, knocking Maya to the ground. Dirt filled her mouth. Her ears rang violently. She rolled to cover, coughing, her left arm streaked with blood from shrapnel. "Hall's hit," Diaz yelled. "I'm fine," she snapped, pressing a gloved hand against the wound. "Keep firing." Pain sharpened her focus. Through blurred vision, she saw a figure on the opposite slope, the insurgent leader, shouting orders, rallying his men. He was clever, using hand signals, coordinating the retreat into a counterattack. Not on my watch, she thought. She steadied her rifle against a rock, ignoring the throbbing in her arm. The man's head appeared briefly over the ridge. She exhaled, crack. He fell instantly, and the fight drained from the others. "Leaders down," she said into the radio. "Ridge secure." The Rangers let out ragged cheers. They had taken the high ground. Minutes later, as the smoke cleared, the battlefield finally began to settle. The enemy remnants melted into the mountains, leaving behind silence once more. Maya lowered her rifle and sank to one knee, catching her breath. Her hands trembled slightly, now that the adrenaline was fading. She wiped dust from her face, leaving a streak of mud across her cheek. Lewis approached her, his gear scorched, eyes tired but alive. "You saved our asses again," he said, offering a faint grin. She shook her head. "We saved each other." He looked at her arm. "You need that patched up." "Later," she said. "I've got ammo to check." He laughed softly. "You don't stop, do you?" "Stopping gets people killed," she said simply. They sat for a moment, both looking out over the valley. The sunset painted everything gold, softening even the ruins of war. For a brief, fragile moment, there was peace. Then her radio crackled again. "Hall QRF inbound. Sit tight. You're about to have company." She glanced toward the southern horizon and saw dust trails, armored vehicles, and reinforcements moving fast. Diaz slumped against a rock, exhaling in relief. "Never thought I'd be happy to see those guys." "Let's clean up before they get here," Maya said, already checking her rifle. Lewis stared at her, half in disbelief, half in admiration. "You're something else, Hall." She gave a faint, tired smile. "So I've been told." When the quick reaction force finally arrived, they found the ridge secure and the Rangers still standing, bloodied, exhausted, but alive. The QRF commander dismounted, scanning the scene. "Who led this?" he asked, astonished by the sight of so few holding so much ground. Lewis pointed at Maya. "She did?" The commander blinked. "Her? Alone?" Maya didn't look up from where she was cleaning her rifle. "Not alone. They just needed direction." The commander studied her, a medic turned sniper, calm as granite. "I'll make sure command hears about this." "Don't," she said, standing. "They'll just make me do more paperwork." Even Lewis laughed at that. But as they loaded up for departure, he noticed her staring at the valley one last time. The same battlefield where she had appeared through smoke hours ago, turning a desperate stand into survival. He stepped beside her. "You knew the risks, dropping in like that. Why'd you do it?" Her eyes stayed on the horizon. "Because when someone calls for help," she said quietly, "you answer. Doesn't matter who's shooting at you." Lewis nodded slowly. "Guess that's what separates soldiers from heroes." She turned slightly, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. "No," she said. "It's what keeps heroes alive long enough to come home." That night, under the dim light of the forward operating base, Maya finally let the medic patch her wound. Around her, the rescued Rangers laughed and swapped stories, their voices light for the first time in days. Outside, The desert wind howled softly, a reminder of the valley still waiting out there in the dark. Maya glanced toward it through the tent flap, her expression unreadable. She had survived the day, but somewhere deep inside, she knew the fight wasn't over. Not for her. Not yet. The desert night was cold, unnaturally quiet after the thunder of war. The stars above Kandahar glowed sharp and distant, untouched by the smoke of human struggle. Inside the forward operating base, the hum of generators replaced the sound of gunfire. But for Staff Sergeant Maya Hall, silence was never peace. It was memory. She sat on the edge of a cot in the medical tent, her left arm wrapped in clean bandages, her gear stripped down beside her. A young medic named Carson finished taping a last dressing, his hands trembling slightly. "Ma'am, that shrapnel was close to the artery. You're lucky." Maya offered a thin smile. Luck's just discipline meeting chaos. Carson frowned, unsure how to respond. "Still, you should rest. Command's been asking for you." "Command?" She asked, voice even. "They want a debrief. Something about unauthorized engagement." Maya's jaw tightened. She nodded once. "Of course they do." 2 hours later, she stood in the operations tent, facing a row of senior officers whose uniforms looked too clean for the field. The air inside with the scent of stale coffee and authority. At the center of the table sat Colonel Rourke, broad-shouldered, precise, his eyes like cold steel. He tapped a folder on the table, labeled HALL. Maya E. Incident Report 47A. "Staff Sergeant Hall," he began, voice clipped. "You were assigned as a medical support element to Delta 9, not as a sniper." "Yes, sir," she replied calmly. "And yet," Rourke continued, "you inserted into an active combat zone without authorization, engaged enemy combatants, and directly influenced the outcome of an engagement involving Ranger elements." "Yes, sir," she repeated. He leaned forward. "Do you understand the severity of that decision?" Maya met his gaze. "I understand that Bravo team would be dead if I hadn't." A murmur rippled through the room. Rourke's expression didn't change. "You risked compromising the mission protocol." "With respect, sir," she said evenly, "the mission was already compromised. My choice was between a breach in protocol or a body bag for 12 Rangers." Silence. Rourke studied her for a long moment, then leaned back. "You think that justifies disobedience?" "I think it justifies saving lives," she said. "That's why we're here." The colonel exhaled through his nose, the faintest sign of irritation, or maybe respect. He flipped open the folder. Inside were satellite photos, after-action reports, and a short stack of commendations written by Ranger Command. One line stood out, typed in all caps. "She appeared through the smoke and turned certain death into survival." Rourke glanced down, then back at her. "You've made quite an impression, Sergeant." "I didn't intend to," Maya replied. "That's what makes it worse," he muttered. Another officer, a major with sharp eyes and a faint scar across his chin, leaned forward. "Colonel, with all due respect, her initiative may have violated protocol, but the results speak for themselves. She neutralized 33 hostiles, secured the ridge, and held position until QRF arrived. That's not insubordination, that's battlefield leadership." Rourke didn't answer right away. He stared at Maya like he was trying to read the soul behind her calm expression. Finally, he said, "Dismissed, Sergeant. We'll reconvene at 0800 for final review." Maya saluted sharply, turned, and walked out. Outside, the night was colder than before. She stood alone near the perimeter fence, looking out at the endless desert. In the distance, the horizon shimmered, not with heat, but with ghosts of the day. She could still hear the gunfire, still smell the smoke. The adrenaline had faded, but the images remained, The faces of the wounded, the stillness of the dead, the sound of her own breathing through the storm. Footsteps approached. She didn't turn. "You handled yourself well in there," came Lewis's voice. She half smiled. "You spying on my debrief now?" He chuckled softly. "Word travels fast. Roke's tough, but he's not blind. They'll write you up for breaking rules, and then pin a medal on you for doing it." "I'm not here for medals," she said. "I know." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the horizon. Then Lewis said quietly, "You ever think about what comes next?" Maya's eyes stayed on the darkness. "Next, after this," he said. "After war." She thought for a moment before replying. "War doesn't end. It just changes shape." Lewis looked at her, sensing the weight behind her words. "You've seen more than you let on, haven't you?" She didn't answer, but her silence said everything. At dawn, Maya was called back into the command tent. The room was emptier now, just Rourke, the scarred major, and a civilian man in a dark suit. His presence immediately set her on edge. "Staff Sergeant," Rourke said, gesturing to a chair. "This is Agent Nolan from JSOC Liaison. He's here on behalf of an alternative operations program." The civilian smiled politely, but his eyes were analytical, dissecting. "We've reviewed your field performance, Sergeant Hall. It's impressive. You demonstrated initiative, adaptability, and psychological control under extreme duress. Frankly, you operated above your rank." "I did what I had to," Maya said simply. Nolan nodded. "That's exactly what we're looking for." Rourke folded his arms. "Hall, this isn't punishment. It's a reassignment, high risk, classified, and voluntary." "Voluntary?" she asked, suspicion edging her tone. Nolan slid a folder toward her. "Operation Cold Rain, counterinsurgency and covert recon. You'd operate in small autonomous teams or alone. Extreme discretion required." Maya flipped through the pages. Most of it was redacted. "What happens if I say no?" she asked. Rourke's voice was flat. "Then you go home. A medal, a quiet discharge, and a file marked potential liability." She looked from Rourke to Nolan. "And if I say yes?" Nolan's smile thinned. "Then we stop calling you a medic and start calling you what you've already proven to be, a sniper with a conscience." The tent was silent, except for the low hum of the lights. Maya stared down at the papers. They were heavy, not because of what they said, but because of what they didn't. She finally looked up. "When do I start?" Later that night, Lewis found her outside the armory, loading her rifle case. "You're leaving, aren't you?" he asked. She nodded. "Orders came through. New mission?" "Something like that." He hesitated, then said, "You know, they don't send regular soldiers on something like that. They send ghosts." Maya met his eyes. "Maybe that's what I've become." He frowned. "You're not a ghost, Hall. You're the reason some of us are still breathing." She smiled faintly, then closed the case. "Then breathe for both of us." He watched her walk away, the desert wind tugging at her hair, the same wind that had carried the sound of her rifle through the smoke days before. At the airstrip, Maya paused at the foot of the transport plane. The engines roared, drowning thought. She looked back once, at the base, the men, the valley beyond, and then climbed the ramp without another word. As the aircraft lifted into the night, the lights of Kandahar faded below, replaced by the endless darkness of the unknown. In that darkness, Maya felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not fear, not pride, purpose. The C-130 transport sliced through the black sky, its engines humming low. Inside, Staff Sergeant Maya Hall sat alone, strapped into a jump seat, helmet resting in her lap. The red cabin light painted everything in blood tones, a color that matched the silence inside her head. No one had told her exactly where she was going, only that her orders were classified, her record sealed, and her future rewritten. Across from her sat two other operators, both in unmarked combat gear, faces unreadable behind night vision mounts. One nodded once in acknowledgement. The other didn't even glance her way. It didn't bother her. In special operations, trust wasn't given. It was proven. As the aircraft began to descend, the pilot's voice came through her headset. Touching down in 5. Welcome to the deep end. Maya tightened her harness. The deep end, she thought. She'd been living there for years. The airstrip was nothing more than a strip of cracked tarmac in the middle of the desert. A blacked-out convoy waited nearby. No flags, no insignia, no questions. She stepped out into the cold night. A man in a plain windbreaker approached, clipboard in hand. Staff Sergeant Hall? Yes, follow me. He led her into a windowless building made of concrete and silence. Inside, every corridor looked the same, sterile, white, humming with unseen power. Cameras blinked in the corners. Finally, he opened a door marked Restricted Access. Cold Rain Command Center. The room beyond looked like something out of another world. A wall of screens. Digital maps, live drone feeds, encrypted comms. Operators moved silently between stations, their faces half-lit by blue light. At the center stood Agent Nolan, the man who had recruited her. He turned as she entered. Welcome to the Shadows, Sergeant. Maya kept her tone neutral. What's the mission? He smiled faintly. Straight to business. I like that. He motioned toward a screen. A satellite image filled the display, a remote mountain range near the Afghan-Pakistani border. Red dots pulsed across it. This, Nolan said, is the Ghost Corridor, a supply line used by insurgent factions to smuggle weapons across the frontier. Intelligence suggests the network is protected by ex-military contractors. American, Russian, maybe both. We can't confirm. Your job is to? Alone? Nolan shook his head. You'll have a team. But make no mistake, this isn't conventional warfare. You'll be out there without flag, without backup, and without acknowledgement. If you're caught, I don't exist, Maya finished. He nodded. Exactly. He handed her a dossier. Inside was a list of names, photos, and locations. The top one caught her attention. Calcine, Viper, former Green, Beret, now working for private contractors in the corridor. Her eyes hardened. I've heard of him. Then you know what he's capable of, Nolan said. He doesn't miss. Neither should you. 2 days later, Maya found herself deep in the mountains, the world reduced to stone, silence, and the rhythmic crunch of boots on gravel. Her team moved in tight formation behind her. 3 operators, each from a different unit, each a ghost like her. There was Reese, a demolitions expert with a broken grin. Torres, a quiet communications wizard. And Holt, the team's second sniper, lean and precise. No one spoke much. They didn't need to. Every gesture, every glance was enough. They hiked for hours under the thin moonlight until Reese raised a hand. Contact. 2 tangos ahead, patrolling the ridge. Maya dropped to her belly, peering through her scope. 2 figures moved along the ridge, relaxed, unaware. She could hear their faint laughter carried on the wind. Holt crawled up beside her. You take left? I'll take right, she whispered. They fired simultaneously. 2 suppressed shots, 2 bodies dropping silently into dust. Reese muttered under his breath. Clean as glass. Maya nodded. Move. By dawn, they reached an abandoned outpost overlooking a narrow pass. Drones couldn't reach here. The cliffs were too steep, the air too thin. From this point on, they were blind. Torres set up comms. Base signal cut off. We're on our own. Good, Maya said, scanning the valley below through her scope. Let's do what we came for. Through the magnification, she could see the convoy, trucks, heavily armed, guarded by men in mismatched tactical gear. They weren't insurgents. Their movements were too clean, too rehearsed. Those aren't locals, Holt said, watching through binoculars. No, Maya agreed. They're trained. Contractors, just like Nolan said. Orders? Reese asked. Observe, she said. Not engage. But even as she said it, her instincts screamed. Something felt wrong. The trucks were unloading crates, not weapons, but people. She adjusted focus. Prisoners, blindfolded, civilian. Her stomach clenched. They're moving hostages, she whispered. Torres looked up. That wasn't in the brief. It never is, she muttered. She tapped her earpiece, switching channels. Command, this is Hall. We have visual confirmation of civilian captives at Grid 71 Delta. Request immediate clarification. Static. No response. She tried again. Command, confirm. We've got non-combatants in play. Still nothing. Holt frowned. Come silence. Think they cut us off? Or they don't want us to know, she said softly. The team exchanged uneasy glances. Reese muttered, So what now? We sit here and watch them move hostages? Maya looked through her scope again. One of the prisoners stumbled and was struck across the face with a rifle butt. The sound, faint but sharp, carried on the wind. Her jaw tightened. No, she said. We don't watch. They moved fast and low, descending through the rocks. Every motion was precise, muscle memory born of too many missions. When they reached the lower ridge, the air was thick with diesel fumes and tension. The convoy below began to move again. Guards walked alongside, rifles slung lazily. 2 sentries at 12, Holt whispered. 4 more near the trucks. Take the flank, Maya ordered. On my shot? She exhaled, steadied her rifle, and squeezed the trigger. The first target dropped instantly. The second barely turned before Holt's bullet found him. Reese and Torres charged forward, their suppressed carbines spitting controlled bursts. Within seconds, it was chaos, guards shouting, trucks screeching to a halt. Maya sprinted toward the nearest vehicle, pulling open the door. Inside, 3 hostages stared back at her, blindfolded, terrified. U.S. military, she said quickly. Stay down. She cut their restraints, ushering them out. Behind her, gunfire crackled as Reese engaged a remaining guard. Then came the sound she feared most, a high-pitched click whir from somewhere above. Drone, Torres shouted. Eyes in the sky. A drone? Out here? That made no sense. Maya dove behind a rock as the drone fired a burst of micro-missiles. The blast tore through one of the trucks, flipping it sideways. Shrapnel filled the air. Reese went down, screaming. Maya crawled to him. Hold still. Blood poured from his shoulder. We're burned, he gasped. They knew we were coming. Her heart pounded. Command silence. Drones online. Contractors already waiting. It was a setup. She grabbed her radio, snarling into it. Command. This is Hall. What the hell's going on? We're under attack from use-made drones. Only static answered. Hall, Holt shouted. They're flanking. She fired back, every shot fueled by betrayal. By the time the last echo faded, 2 trucks burned, and half her team lay wounded. The hostages were safe, hidden behind a ridge, but the cost was brutal. Torres crouched beside her, face pale. You realize what this means, right? Someone in command wanted this. Maya wiped blood from her cheek. Yeah, and now I want answers. She looked at Reese, unconscious but alive, then up at the smoke curling toward the empty sky. For the first time since she joined the military, she wasn't sure who the enemy really was. That night, as she patched Reese's wound under a dim flashlight, Holt broke the silence. You think Nolan knew? Maya didn't answer right away. He knew something. And now? She glanced toward the horizon, her voice quiet but cold. Now we finish this. Not for them. For us. The mountains loomed like sleeping beasts around them. Somewhere out there, men with their country's weapons were trading lives like currency. And Maya Hall, the medic who became a sniper, the soldier who broke protocol to save others, was about to declare her own war. The sun had barely touched the mountain peaks when Maya Hall woke up to the sound of wind scraping through stone. The campfire had gone out hours ago, leaving only cold ashes and the distant hum of drones somewhere in the high valleys. She sat up, feeling every bruise from the fight the night before. Her muscles ached, her throat was raw from smoke, but her mind was sharper than ever. The silence around her wasn't peace. It was warning. Reese lay a few feet away, still unconscious but breathing. Holt was cleaning his rifle beside a rock, every motion tight with frustration. Torres was working the radio again, cycling through encrypted frequencies. Anything? Maya asked quietly. He shook his head. No signal. Either we're jammed or we've been erased. Erased? Holt snapped. You mean command just cut us off? Torres glanced up, face grim. When's the last time you heard from Nolan? Or anyone from HQ? Maya didn't answer. She didn't have to. The truth was, the silence wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. By noon, they began moving again, not toward their extraction zone, but deeper into the mountains. Maya's plan was simple. Find a vantage point, hack into the satellite feed herself, and uncover who had targeted them. Every step was a fight against exhaustion and doubt. But she couldn't stop. Not now. Not after what they'd seen. As they climbed a steep ridge, Holt broke the quiet. You think this was some kind of black op? Maybe they were testing us? Maya didn't turn around. No test kills hostages. No test sends friendly drones. He frowned. Then what was it? She stopped, looking over her shoulder, her voice low. A cover-up. Someone didn't want those hostages alive. Torres looked stunned. Civilians? Why would... Because they weren't civilians, she interrupted. They were assets. People who knew something. Something worth burying. The words hung heavy in the cold air. Reese stirred faintly behind them, groaning. Burying what? Maya's eyes hardened. That's what we're going to find out. Hours later, they reached an abandoned listening post, an old CIA relay station from the early 2000s, left to rust in the cliffs. Its satellite dish still pointed skyward, covered in snow and bullet holes. Perfect, Maya said. Torres, patch into that dish. Holt, set perimeter. No one gets within 50 meters. As Torres connected his laptop to the power unit, sparks flickered. The system was barely functional, but the signal bar blinked alive, faint but real. Got it, he whispered. Linking into military satellite net. Stand by. Maya leaned over his shoulder. Look for Operation Cold Rain files. Anything classified under special access. Torres typed rapidly, sweat dripping despite the cold. After a minute, a new window opened. Encrypted data, black on red clearance markings. He exhaled. Found something. Mission logs, orders, transmission history. Pull it up. Lines of text filled the screen. Maya scanned quickly. Times, coordinates, call signs. Then her eyes froze on one line. Strike authorization. Operative Hall Team, Asset Disposal Protocol. Confirmed by Agent Nolan, Command Oversight. She felt her stomach drop. Asset disposal. Torres read it too. Wait, that means us. Her fists clenched. We weren't meant to extract anyone. We were the disposal team. Holt swore under his breath. They sent us to die. Clean up the mess and erase the witnesses. The wind howled through the open structure, cold and merciless. Maya stared at the screen, and Nolan's name glowing back at her. The man who recruited her. The man who said he believed in her. She whispered, "He used me." Torres turned to her, his voice soft. "Maya, we need to get this intel out. To someone above Nolan's chain." "There's no above in this kind of operation," she said bitterly. "Only shadows." "But there's always someone," Holt argued. "You said it yourself. People need to know." She looked at him, and for a moment, the soldier's steel melted into something human. "Yeah, they do." That night, they huddled inside the cold structure. Torres kept his laptop running, encrypting the stolen files. Holt stood guard. Maya sat beside the dying fire, staring at the flickering flame. Her mind replayed every moment since she'd joined Cold Rain. The secrecy, the vague orders, Nolan's smooth lies about national interests. National interests. How many lives have been traded under those two words? She remembered the first time she'd ever picked up a rifle, the weight of it, the promise she made to herself to protect others. And now, she was protecting the truth from her own command. Reese stirred awake. "Hey," he croaked. "You look like hell." She managed a tired smirk. "So do you?" He glanced at her hand, trembling slightly as she loaded a magazine. "You gonna tell me what's next?" She looked at him, her teammate, her brother in arms. "Yeah," she said quietly. "We're not going home." Not yet. The next morning, they started moving again, this time, not toward extraction, but toward Coast, a small airbase still used by private contractors. Maya's plan was simple but suicidal. Infiltrate the base, hijack the encrypted uplink, and transmit the Cold Rain files to military oversight, maybe even the Pentagon. Every hour, they risked interception. Drones swept overhead. Contractors patrolled the roads, but they moved like ghosts. At dusk, the base came into view, a cluster of steel hangars surrounded by barbed wire. Floodlights swept the perimeter. Torres crouched beside her. "That's a fortress. We can't just walk in." "We're not walking in," Maya said. "We're sneaking in." She pointed toward a drainage trench cutting along the fence. "That'll get us under. Once we're inside, you get to the com hub. Holt and I will cover you." Torres swallowed hard. "And if they catch us? Then we make them regret it." The infiltration was silent but tense. They crawled through mud, cutting the wire with steady hands. Once inside, the air was thick with the smell of fuel and metal. Maya's heart pounded as they slipped past patrols, moving between crates and shadows. At last, they reached the com hub, a metal door marked authorized personnel only. Torres cracked the lock in seconds. Inside, monitors glowed with encrypted feeds. He plugged in the drive and began uploading. Uploading 20%, 45%. Outside, the crunch of boots echoed. Holt whispered, "We've got movement." Maya took a rifle and aimed through the slit of the door. 2 guards were approaching, flashlights slicing through the dark. "Keep working," she whispered. 60%, 80%. One of the guards paused, frowning. Maya's pulse hammered. Then a shout. Contact. Gunfire erupted. Holt fired first, dropping one guard. The other ducked behind a vehicle, shouting into his radio. Torres. Maya yelled. 95%. Just a few seconds more. A bullet tore through the window, hitting Torres in the shoulder. He gasped, but didn't stop typing. Almost done? Torres. Upload complete. He shouted, slamming the enter key. Data sent? She fired again, covering him. Move. They dashed out the back exit, alarms blaring, floodlights flooding the compound. They sprinted toward the trench as bullets whistled past. Holt went down on one knee, returning fire. Maya dragged Torres, his blood leaving dark trails in the dirt. They made it past the fence just as a helicopter roared overhead. Keep going, she shouted. To the ridge. By the time they reached cover, the base was in chaos. Explosions blooming behind them, searchlights stabbing through the darkness. Torres lay back, breathing hard, clutching his shoulder. Did we do it? Maya looked toward the sky, where a faint blinking satellite light pulsed above the horizon. We did, she whispered. Now the world knows. Holt looked at her, half grinning despite the chaos. What now, boss? Maya reloaded her rifle, eyes cold. Now we finish what they started. She glanced at the burning horizon and thought of Nolan, the man who betrayed them. The man who would soon realize that his best operative didn't die in the mountains. She was coming for him, and this time she wouldn't be silent. The morning sky over Virginia was a dull steel gray, the kind of color that promised rain but never delivered. Inside the quiet safe house on the outskirts of Arlington, Maya Hall sat at the window, rifle parts spread out before her like the pieces of a puzzle she'd already solved. She moved with slow precision, cleaning, assembling, testing. Every click of metal was a heartbeat in the silence. Behind her, Holt leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching. His shoulder was bandaged, his face lined with exhaustion and admiration. You sure about this? She asked. She didn't look up. I'm done running. He exhaled, nodding once. And Nolan? She snapped the final piece of her rifle into place. He'll answer for everything. The words were flat, but the fire behind them burned steady. 3 weeks had passed since the mission in Coast. The leaked files evidence of operation. Cold rain had ignited a storm in Washington. News outlets were flooded with reports of illegal covert operations, missing civilians, and unacknowledged military strikes. The Pentagon denied everything. The CIA went silent. And Agent Michael Nolan, the man who built the operation, disappeared into the bureaucratic shadows, untouchable, invisible, protected. Until now. Maya had tracked him the way she'd hunted insurgents years ago, patiently, quietly, ruthlessly. Every contact, every whisper, every transfer of funds led her closer. 2 nights ago, she found him. He wasn't in a bunker or safe room. He was at a private security conference in D.C., speaking under a fake name, surrounded by former generals and contractors. To the world, he was just another defense consultant. To her, he was the man who'd ordered her death. That night, as the city's lights bled into the dark, Maya watched through her scope from the rooftop across the street. Inside the glass tower, Nolan was shaking hands, laughing with the powerful, a man reborn. He looked older now, silver hair slicked back, but the same cold smile lingered at the corners of his mouth. Through her earpiece, Holt's voice crackled softly. You have eyes on? Visual, she replied, her tone steady. Target confirmed? Are we going loud or quiet? Maya paused. The question wasn't tactical. It was moral. If she pulled the trigger, it wouldn't just end a man. It would end the part of her that once believed in the system. Quiet, she whispered. No chaos. No spectacle. Just truth. Nolan's guards shifted position near the entrance. Maya tracked their movement, calculating the timing. 3 seconds between patrol rotations, 5 seconds between elevator stops. When the moment came, she packed the rifle, slid it into a guitar case, and moved. The rain started as she crossed the street, light at first, then heavy, masking her steps. Inside the building, the marble floors reflected her ghostly image as she walked past security with forged credentials. The elevator carried her to the 19th floor, its soft hum the only sound. When the doors opened, she stepped into a corridor lined with glass offices and city lights. At the far end, Nolan stood near the window, phone to his ear, voice low and confident. He didn't see her at first. Maya Hall, he said finally, turning. His voice was calm, too calm. I was wondering when you'd show up. Her hand froze halfway to her holster. You expected me? He smiled faintly. Of course. You always finish what you start. They stood there, predator and prey, though it was no longer clear which was which. You sent us to die, she said quietly. He shrugged. You were assets, not soldiers. Every war has its sacrifices. Those hostages weren't assets, she shot back. They were civilians, people you used as bait. He tilted his head. And you saved them. You should be proud. You played your part perfectly. Her jaw tightened. You murdered Americans. I maintained order, he corrected, stepping closer. You think you understand how this world works? You don't. You think there's a clean war? A moral chain of command? There isn't. There's control. And I kept it. Her finger twitched near the trigger. You built an operation that destroyed innocent lives. He chuckled. Innocent? No one's innocent out there. Least of all you, Sergeant Hall. You've killed more people than I've ordered. That hit her like a punch, but she didn't flinch. The difference is, I did it to protect. You did it to profit. Nolan's smirk faltered. You don't get it, do you? Without people like me, the machine falls apart. You can't stop this. She raised her weapon slowly, eyes steady. I don't need to stop the machine. Just one part of it. The next second stretched forever. Rain tapped the windows. Thunder rolled far away. Nolan didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't plead. He simply stared at her, defiant, unrepentant. You think killing me will fix anything? He said softly. They'll replace me tomorrow. Maybe, Maya whispered. But tonight, you answer for it. The sound of the shot was almost gentle. A soft theft from the suppressed muzzle. A whisper of justice in a room full of lies. Nolan collapsed against the window, a crimson bloom spreading on his chest. The city lights flickered in the reflection of his fading eyes. Maya stood there for a long moment, breathing slowly, the rifle steady in her hands. Then she lowered it. When she stepped out of the building, the rain had stopped. The streets glistened, washed clean, as if the world itself was trying to reset. Holt pulled up in a black SUV, engine running. It's done? She nodded. He studied her face, searching for regret. There was none. Just quiet. You know they'll come after you now, he said. They already did, she replied, sliding into the seat. He started the car, merging into the slow crawl of traffic. What happens next? Maya looked out the window as dawn began to rise, pale light cutting through the clouds, illuminating a city still asleep to its own darkness. Next, she said softly, we find the rest of them. For months afterward, the world whispered about her. Some said she vanished overseas. Others claimed she'd been killed. But in the corners of the intelligence world, a new rumor grew about a sniper they called the Ghost of Cold Rain. Every few months, someone tied to the operation disappeared. A contractor, a financier, a field handler. No arrests, no footprints, just silence. And sometimes, on quiet nights in war zones halfway around the world, soldiers swore they saw her, a lone figure moving through the smoke, rifle slung across her back, eyes sharp as ice. They said she never missed. They said she fought for the fallen. They said she was still out there, hunting the men who thought they owned the shadows. And somewhere deep inside that endless war, Maya Hall still whispered the same vow she'd made years ago, when the Rangers first called out. Enemies all around. Not anymore. She'd come through the smoke once. And this time, she wasn't leaving until every ghost was free.